jefes y jefas de Estado y de Gobierno,
heads of state and government, ministers, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. I declare open the second high-level United Nations Conference on South-South Cooperation, and I call to order its first plenary meeting. I wish to inform the conference that in accordance with Rule 17 of the Provisional Rules of Procedure, I will serve as temporary president of the conference until the election of its president. I should like to extend a warm welcome to all of you, and I am looking forward to a successful and productive conference. As representatives are aware, this conference is held pursuant to General Assembly Resolutions 71/244 of 21 December 2016 and 71/318 of 30 August 2017. I now invite the conference to proceed with the election of its president. It is my understanding that there is general agreement among all delegations to elect His Excellency Mauricio Macri, President of the Argentine Republic, as president of this conference. May I take it that the conference wishes to elect by acclamation His Excellency Mauricio Macri as president of the second high-level United Nations Conference on South-South Cooperation? It is so decided. Under Rule 6 of the Provisional Rules of Procedure, the conference should also elect an ex officio vice president from the host country. May I take it that there is agreement to elect Argentina in its capacity as host country as ex officio vice president of the conference? I hear no objection. It is so decided. On behalf of all participants in the conference, I congratulate His Excellency Mauricio Macri on his election as president of the conference, and I invite him to take his seat at the podium to take over the proceedings of the conference. I request protocol to escort His Excellency.
Excelentísimo
Your Excellency Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the United Nations, Your Excellency Maria Fernanda Espinosa Garcés, President of the third session of the General Assembly, distinguished heads of state and government, ministers, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. It is an honor and a privilege for me to have been elected president of the second high-level United Nations Conference on South-South Cooperation. I will now proceed to the lectern to deliver my opening remarks.
Ante todo,
before anything else, once again, I want to welcome you to Argentina. We are very excited to welcome you so that we can continue working together for sustainable, inclusive development. As with the 11th ministerial meeting of the WTO and the presidency of the G20, by presiding over this high-level conference, we demonstrate once again that the international community sees our country as a reliable partner, a leading partner with a vocation to build global and regional governance for the 21st century together. Cooperation is a wonderful tool to promote horizontal linkages between countries with different levels of development. This also became clear last December when, with the premise of building a bridge in diversity, together with leaders, we decided to emphasize in the G20 communiqué the role of South-South cooperation and triangular cooperation to make progress in implementing the 2030 Agenda. Argentina has a long-standing tradition on these fronts, especially in areas such as agroindustry, technological and productive innovation, health, justice, and human rights. Thanks to this work being done by hundreds of national institutions through FOAR, the Argentine Fund for International Cooperation, it was possible to develop 10,800 projects with over 80 countries. 40 years after the adoption of the Buenos Aires Plan of Action, we see a great opportunity before us to strengthen a system that makes it possible to exchange our knowledge and strengthen our capacity even more. An opportunity to demonstrate that cooperation can lead us to a better future. We live in an increasingly interdependent world with complex challenges which call for us to redouble our efforts to push forward a sincere, constructive dialogue where we project ourselves as partners for development. I am convinced that in dialogue and the search for shared interests, we will find the path to achieve the well-being and prosperity of our peoples. The time has come to think of alternative ways of complementing our work. The time has come to think of new areas of cooperation. I thus hope that during these days of work, far-reaching debates will take place and we will be able to take specific steps to strengthen the system of cooperation for development. Once again, I want you to know that you can count on Argentina to cooperate in those areas where we can make a positive, constructive contribution, and also to listen so that we can learn. Let us celebrate this 40th anniversary of the Buenos Aires Plan of Action. Doing more than our best, once again, reaching consensus that will make it possible to translate the achievements we generate from the South and for the entire world. Let us show the world everything we have to give, our talent, our will to work, to grow, to learn. Our objective is clear. We wish to generate solutions, making it possible to continue improving our people's lives. Let us continue to work together for that. Thank you very much to all of you for being with us.
Doy ahora la palabra.
I now give the floor to Her Excellency, Maria Fernandez Espinosa Garces. Please, Madam, you have the floor.
Your Excellency, Mauricio Macri, President of the Republic of Argentina and Chairman of the conference, esteemed Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the United Nations, Your Excellency Ambassador Inga Ronda King, President of ECOSOC, ladies and gentlemen, heads of state and government, ministers, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. As a President of the General Assembly and as a Latin American woman, it is a great honor for me to take part in the opening of this historic conference. I want to thank the government and the people of Argentina for their generous hospitality and their active contribution to the preparation of this conference. I also want to thank Ambassadors Audra Pleipite and Adonia Ayebare of Lithuania and Uganda for their outstanding work in co-facilitating the negotiations on the final document. Also, I would like to highlight the constructive spirit of all the delegations in New York and thank them for their efforts so that we can finally have a sound document on the role of South-South cooperation and the implementation of the 2030 Agenda. The United Nations conference that took place 40 years ago in Buenos Aires is a symbol of solidarity and the determination of the nations of the South to be the actors of their own development and of the need to found a new international order that is more equitable and more inclusive, and to which all can contribute based on their capabilities. Your Excellencies, the world today is different than the one that we lived in then. The geopolitical realities are different, and it's quite clear that the countries of the South have a decisive role today, not only in the economy, but also in the solutions to the various contemporary crises that we face, such as the climate crisis, the migration crisis, and security crisis. Now, our vision of development has also changed. With the 2030 Agenda, we have committed ourselves to transforming the lives of present generations in order to preserve the future of generations that will come. Today, we find ourselves once again in this beautiful city to reaffirm our commitment to South-South cooperation and all the principles it's based on. However, we're also here to highlight the immense potential that this means of cooperation offers us. All this, of course, without forgetting the historic commitment and the responsibilities taken on by developed countries. These 4 decades prove that South-South cooperation and triangular cooperation are powerful tools to effect positive changes in the countries of the South in their efforts to eradicate poverty in all its forms and dimensions. Now, countless projects that have been developed in the framework of South-South cooperation have produced extraordinary results, such as creation of jobs, strengthening of institutions and public policies, improvement in healthcare, education, culture, infrastructure, and the transfer of technology, as well as the capacity of response to natural disasters or emergency situations. And the list goes on. Our challenge, starting from today, is to promote these examples and to adapt them to the new paradigm of sustainable development, and also to develop innovative ways of working together. Now, for medium-income countries, South-South cooperation can contribute to reducing inequalities and provide financing and investment. For landlocked developing countries and the LDCs, what is needed are initiatives to transform their productive capacities and diversify them. We also need to facilitate for small island developing states access to initiatives to adapt so they can adapt to climate change, bolster their resilience and sustainability of their debt. Also, the African 2060 Development Agenda should as well benefit from this powerful tool. To achieve all this, it's essential to have technical and financial resources. According to UNCTAD, the current financial gap to achieve the SDGs has reached $2.5 billion per year. We should also assess the impact of South-South cooperation and identify the main challenges for its implementation. We need more information and more statistics. And in all our initiatives, we should, of course, include a gender perspective. To achieve gender equality and the empowerment of women is a necessity and also an obligation. South-South cooperation can be traced back to an awakening of the conscience of countries of the South, nations of the South. And we have, based on that, we've managed to overcome welfare-based models of assistance and models of vertical cooperation. For example, trans-regional technical cooperation for renewable energies in India, China, or Brazil are essential for the future environmental sustainability and economic sustainability. It's essential for us to consider the benefits of the fourth industrial revolution, that these should also benefit countries of the South. In the area of health, we should highlight the contingents of Cuban doctors in Africa deployed to overcome the Ebola emergency, or the promising initiative of the 4 countries of the Northern Triangle of Central America in developing a comprehensive plan to deal with migration. However, South-South cooperation is not a replacement for North-South cooperation. It complements it and enriches it. Official development aid remains critical and essential for pledges of ODA to be fulfilled. South-South cooperation is also the backbone of regional integration. It brings people together and facilitates processes of political coordination and makes us stronger. Your Excellencies, we are witnessing a wave of challenges to the multilateral system, as well as to the norms and institutions that we've built with so much effort. Isolationist forces, extreme nationalism are re-emerging in various parts of our planet. The best way to respond to this is to be even more effective and for our action to have even more, to greater impact. To achieve this, even stronger leadership is necessary. And the question we need to ask ourselves is the 821 million people who are suffering hunger, the 258 million migrants, or the more than 193 million jobless, what are their dreams? What are their needs? What do they expect from us? The answer is that whether in New York or New Delhi, in Paris, in Pretoria, in Quito, or in Helsinki, everyone shares the same dream: to have a decent job, to have decent education and health care, a safe and clean environment, a government that listens and responds, and an effective international system that produces tangible results. However, these dreams that appear so basic appear increasingly distant. Feelings of anxiety and frustration must have a convincing response that comes from a multilateral system based on cooperation and in its capacity to have an impact, to guide and to support governments and societies. It has been proven that South-South cooperation and then triangular cooperation have produce these responses and make it possible to connect with people and transform in a positive way the lives of millions of people and of communities. It is clear that we are contributing to restoring trust in and the effectiveness of international cooperation and multilateral efforts. Your Excellencies, friends, lastly, I'd like to say that South-South cooperation represents the very best of our nations. Indeed, it is precisely the principles of solidarity and of working for the common good that make South-South cooperation such a powerful force. Now, recalling Gandhi, we can affirm that South-South cooperation can embody the change that we want to see in the world. I am very encouraged by what we have achieved so far, and I have no doubt that South-South cooperation will have a transformative power for the future, and I wish you an excellent conference. Thank you.
Doy las gracias a la presidenta.
I thank the President of the General Assembly for her statement. I now give the floor to His Excellency Antonio Guterres.
Excelentísimo señor Presidente.
Your Excellency President Mauricio Macri, Your Excellency President Maria Fernanda Espinosa Garcés, Your Excellency Ambassador Adonia Ayabare, I thank the government and the people of Argentina for welcoming this conference. 40 years ago, the historic International Conference on South-South Cooperation gave way to the Buenos Aires Plan of Action plan to promote and realize technical cooperation between developing countries. Since then, the Buenos Aires Plan of Action, known as BAPA, has been the basis and the reference point of South-South cooperation, guided by the principles of national ownership, equality, and non-conditionality. BAPA transformed the dynamics of international cooperation. It also highlighted the value of a different way of cooperating based on the exchange of appropriate knowledge and technology between challenges that face similar development challenges. In the entire Global South, we have borne witness to a remarkable process since BAPA was adopted. Thanks in part to South-South cooperation, millions of women, children, and men have emerged from extreme poverty. Countries in development have reached some of the fastest rates of economic growth until now and have agreed on world standards for sustainable development. Meeting once again today in Buenos Aires, we recognize and celebrate the long path that we have walked together, but we also acknowledge the common challenges. Today, we're here to ensure that South-South cooperation continues to respond to the changing reality of world development and the constantly changing needs of developing countries as these adopt the 2030 Agenda. We have the opportunity to develop and strengthen frameworks for South-South cooperation, to perfect systems and tools, and to increase transparency and encourage accountability.
Excellencies, I see 5 issues that will be central to implementing the Paris Agreement on climate change and achieving the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. And South-South cooperation can offer solutions to all of them. First, rising inequality both between and within countries is eroding trust and deepening a sense of injustice. Globalization has enabled many people to escape poverty, but its benefits are not shared equitably and its costs fall disproportionately on the poor and the vulnerable. Cooperation can enable developing countries to learn from each other and grow more quickly, close income gaps, and build inclusive and resilient societies. Second, climate change is the defining issue of our time, and we are losing the race. 2018 was the 4th hottest year on record, and natural disasters are impacting nearly every region. And this is why I'm bringing world leaders together at the Climate Action Summit in New York in September. I'm calling on leaders to bring concrete, realistic plans that raise ambition on mitigation, adaptation, finance, and innovation. We must enhance nationally determined contributions by 2020, in line with the reducing greenhouse gases emissions by 45% over the next decade. We need fundamental shifts to support green financing and increase investment in climate action from billions to trillions. And the Green Climate Fund must be fully resourced and operational. And the pledge to mobilize $100 billion a year by 2020 for climate action in the developing world, including mitigation and adaptation, must be implemented. South-South cooperation will be vital to ensure mutual support and exchange of best practices, to enhance adaptation and increase the resilience of developing countries and communities facing the devastating impacts of climate change. And South-South cooperation can also support the transformation of economies depending on fossil fuels with strategies that reinforce both sustainable development and environmental protection. Third, infrastructure and energy needs are set to expand enormously thanks to population growth and urbanization in the Global South. Some 60% of the area that is expected to become urban by 2030 has yet to be built. And if we get this wrong, we will lock ourselves into a high emissions future with potentially catastrophic consequences. But if we get the infrastructure right, it will be an opportunity for development cooperation, industrial transition and growth, cross-border trade and investment, climate change mitigation, adaptation, and sustainable development. Fourth, gender has been described as the docking station for the SDGs, since it offers opportunities to engage on different cross-cutting issues. It must be at the heart of all efforts if we are to succeed. We have seen significant progress for women over the past 40 years. More girls are in school, more women are doing paid work. Harmful practices like female genital mutilation and child marriage are in decline. But this progress is not complete. Indeed, we are seeing a pushback against our efforts. And in some cases, the gender equality gap is widening. This affects us all, because where women are better represented in politics, we see improved social protection and increased spending on development. When women have access to land and credit, harvests increase. When girls are educated, they contribute more to their communities and break cycles of poverty. And let's not forget that countries with the highest number of women in parliament, in the national security institutions, and as farmers are indeed in the global south. Fifth, the multilateral development system must be better positioned to support South-South cooperation and implement the 2030 agenda. South-South cooperation has evolved significantly over the last decades, but multilateral institutions, including the United Nations, have not kept up. I'm grateful to Member States for recognizing the role of the United Nations in the outcome conference of this conference. And we will take up the mandate you are entrusting to us, and you can count on my personal commitment to make sure the ongoing reforms of the United Nations reinvigorate our support for South-South cooperation. Excellencies, we also need to realign financing for sustainable development and unlock the trillions that will deliver the 2030 agenda. South-South cooperation can never be a substitute for official development assistance or replace the responsibilities of the global north set out in the Addis Ababa Action Agenda and the Paris Agreement. South-South cooperation must also involve young people, civil society, the private sector, academia and others, building innovative partnerships and extending the reach of initiatives. It must harness the potential of new technologies and digitalization that create opportunities and promote inclusivity. South-South cooperation is a global exercise of all countries of the South to benefit everyone, and including the least developed countries. Every country, every partner has something to share or teach, whatever their circumstances. Excellencies, this conference is a starting point. Later this year, over the course of a week in September, heads of state will gather in New York for the Sustainable Development Goals Summit and the Climate Action Summit. They will hold high-level meetings on universal health coverage and financing for development and review progress on support for small island developing states. All these meetings are aimed at accelerating implementation of the 2030 Agenda and the Paris Agreement, which are born from a consensus on the common interests that bind us together. Now it's time to stake out that common ground again and take bold and transformative action. Together, we can achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, we can beat climate change, and we can transform the lives of people around the world. Thank you.
Doy las gracias al secretario.
I thank the Secretary General of the United Nations for his opening statement. I now give the floor to the President of the Economic and Social Council, Her Excellency Inga Rhonda King.
Your Excellency, Mr. Mauricio Macri, President of Argentina and President of the Conference on South-South Cooperation, Your Excellency, Ms. Maria Fernanda Espinosa Garces, President of the General Assembly, Your Excellency, Mr. Antonio Guterres, Secretary General, Administrator of the UN Development Program, Mr. Akim Steiner, Your Excellency, Mr. Adonia Ayebara, President-designate of the High-Level Committee on South-South Cooperation, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. 40 years since the adoption of the Buenos Aires Plan of Action, South-South Cooperation is today a key to unlock the promise of the 2030 Agenda. The 2018 Development Cooperation Forum survey indicates that developing countries increasingly incorporate South-South and triangular cooperation in their national development cooperation strategies. My own country, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, a small island developing state, has made progress with the shared expertise and know-how from our neighbors and friends in the South. South-South cooperation has been instrumental in my country's pursuit of a sustainable future. This has also been the experience of many others from the Global South. And what strikes me is how much the current dynamism and innovation in the South-South space are cutting through business as usual politics and policy. Still, much more can be done to fully leverage South-South and triangular cooperation for sustainable development. I would like to highlight among many 4 key points of action recommended by ECOSOC's Development Cooperation Forum, the DCF. First, be more visible. The visibility of South-South and triangular cooperation must be further increased. Analyzing their added value and sustainable development impact will only advance the global effort to achieve the 2030 Agenda. Such efforts should be supported at all levels, including globally through the DCF and other ECOSOC platforms, such as the Financing for Development Forum, Multi-Stakeholder Forum on Science, Technology and Innovation, and High-Level Political Forum on Sustainable Development. These are your fora. Please use them. Second, be bold. Countries and actors of the Global South must be bolder in sharing their experiences and evidence on development cooperation, and the Global North bolder in learning from and integrating the experience of the Global South into their practices. Third, be strategic. Regional and national experiences in South-South and triangular cooperation should be mainstreamed into national development plans. This will promote more transparent, accountable, and impactful cooperation. It should also, 1, further strengthen institutional capacities and collaborative arrangements, and 2, build integrated national financing frameworks. Fourth, be specific in boosting inclusion and effective multi-stakeholder engagement. Increase engagement of parliamentarians, local authorities, women, civil society, youth, and other stakeholders. To this end, more exchanges are needed on how we can leverage the comparative advantages of the different stakeholders involved, and how to develop applicable policy and legal frameworks. In the lead-up to its next high-level meeting in May 2020, the DCF will continue to contribute as a unique and trusted space for sharing on-the-ground insights and advancing action-oriented global policy dialogue on South-South and triangular cooperation. Excellencies, everyone active in the South-South space has a story of how collective ingenuity and solidarity can overcome the seemingly insurmountable. In St. Vincent and the Grenadines, after decades facing huge costs and limited availability of suitable land, the combination of creativity and political will with effective South-South cooperation, both technical and financial, within a broad-based, country-owned effort, brought to life the Argyle International Airport in 2017. This was our first international airport and the largest capital project ever undertaken in the country. Think what the world can achieve with more broad-based, country-owned, inclusive, and structured South-South and triangular cooperation for sustainable development. In closing, I would like to thank our esteemed hosts, the government of Argentina, and wish all participants a most successful conference. I thank you.
Doy las gracias.
I want to thank the President of the Economic and Social Council. Now, I unfortunately need to leave, and I will be replaced by my deputy. I will be replaced by Minister Jorge Fabre, Ambassador Jorge Fabre, Foreign Minister.
Continuamos, María Fernanda, ¿no? Continuamos. Está ahí. No, no, lo tiene que hacer así. Continuando.
So we will continue with the session now. I now give the floor to the Administrator of the United Nations Development Program, Mr. Achim Steiner.
Your Excellency, the Minister of Foreign Affairs and also Vice President of the Conference, Your Excellency, the President of the General Assembly, Your Excellency, Secretary General, Your Excellency, the President of the Economic and Social Council, and Your Excellency, the President-designate of the High-Level Committee on South-South Cooperation. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, I would like to begin by saying what a privilege it is for me to attend this conference 40 years after an idea was born here in Buenos Aires at the first South-South Cooperation Conference, and to act as your Secretary General, for which I want to thank the Member States for their confidence and support. Yesterday, together with Minister Furi, we had the very touching honor of attending the joint flag-raising ceremony here in Buenos Aires. And it is wonderful to see the flag of the United Nations and that of Argentina flying next to each other in hosting such an inspiring conference that began a journey on South-South cooperation here in Buenos Aires just over 40 years ago. And 40 years ago, when member states met in Buenos Aires to adopt the plan of action, the Buenos Aires Plan of Action, it marked the beginning of an idea that was to change the way that international cooperation was to evolve, not only between countries, but also within the context of international cooperation generally and within the United Nations. It was a time that was very different from today's, and as we meet 40 years later here in Buenos Aires for BAPA plus 40 or PABA plus 40, it is also a reminder of how far we have traveled together, how significantly the world has evolved since that time, and how important the concept of South-South cooperation and triangular cooperation remains to this world. Intra-South trade today is higher than ever, accounting for more than a quarter of all world trade, while foreign direct investment outflows from the South today represent 1/3 of global foreign direct investment flows. South-South cooperation has become, in many respects, a distinct and yet integral element of international cooperation. It is distinct and integral to the development of the global economy as we view it today. It is distinct and integral to the Agenda 2030 and the Sustainable Development Goals, and it is distinct and integral also to the United Nations Sustainable Development work, and indeed the work of the United Nations Development Programme, whose own journey in accompanying South-South cooperation has been an integral part of the agenda since its birth. Indeed, a year before the Buenos Aires conference in 1978, it was UNDP that helped to facilitate in Kuwait a meeting that drew out the principles and directions that would then inform that first conference and ultimately the Buenos Aires Plan of Action. In today's world, South cooperation, triangular cooperation are indeed distinct but integral also to the work of UNDP. Whether it is from Colombia to the Dominican Republic, where we collaborate on climate-resistant rice, whether it is from Ethiopia to Cameroon on HIV safety net programs, whether it is in working with Cuba and in the Caribbean on disaster risk reduction, whether it is working with China and Africa on renewable energy, or in the digital economy of today, working with India or with Bangladesh on taking advantage of some of the greatest and most recent innovations in terms of e-government, the digital economy, connecting rural health centers through cellular networks to national cold chain management systems for vaccines, having access points, as we have seen in Bangladesh with the access to information system and network that allows citizens with now 5,300 e-government access points across the country to significantly reduce their time to take advantage of government services. These are just a few of the examples that have become an integral part of the offering that we also want to renew as UNDP here in Buenos Aires in the year 2019 to South-South cooperation and triangular cooperation. In today's portfolio of UNDP, we depend on South-South cooperation to a degree as never before. More than 900 projects distinctly identify South-South cooperation as central to our work, and I hope that in both the interactions and the opportunities we will have as a UN family to engage with you during the coming 2 days, you will sense how committed we are to indeed realize the Secretary General's pledge that he has just made to you. Let me end, Excellencies, by thanking all those who worked so hard to make this conference possible, from those permanent representatives in New York who led the negotiations, to my colleagues in the United Nations Office of South-South Cooperation, and in particular its head Jorge Shediek, to my colleague Catherine Pollard and the GCAM team that have worked so hard together with our colleagues here in Argentina to make this conference be a very efficient and effective forum for all of you. And above all, our colleagues in the Argentinian government, in the institutions with whom we have worked over the last year in preparing the stage for BAPA plus 40. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, let us speak with a loud voice, as you just called for, President, and with clarity about an idea that is not just about technical and technocratic cooperation. It is an idea that is meant to inspire, it is meant to accelerate, and it is meant to bring the world together in support of the development aspirations of 7 billion people, and in particular those of the Global South. For us in UNDP, it is a privilege to accompany you on this journey. Thank you.
I want to thank the Administrator of the United Nations Development Program, and I would now like to give the floor to the President-Designate of the High-Level Committee on South-South Cooperation, His Excellency Adonia Ayebare.
Your Excellency, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Argentina and Vice President of the Conference, Heads of States and Government, Your Excellency Fernanda Espinosa, President of the 73rd Session of the General Assembly, Your Excellency Inga Londa King, the President of the Economic and Social Council, Mr. Achim Steiner, UNDP Administrator, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great honor for me to speak today at the celebration of the 40th anniversary of the landmark International Conference on South-South Cooperation that led to the Buenos Aires Plan of Action known as BAPA. I would like to express at the outset my appreciation for the government and the people of Argentina under the leadership of President Macri for their warm reception in hosting us here. I would like to thank the Secretary General, Mr. Antonio Guterres, for his support in convening this conference, and Her Excellency Maria Fernanda Espinosa, the President of the General Assembly, for leading the intergovernmental process. I would also like to thank my fellow co-facilitator of the outcome document for this conference, Her Excellency Ambassador Udra Prepayat, Permanent Representative of Estonia to the United Nations, for her hard work bringing all parties together in open, transparent, and inclusive consultations to achieve consensus on this historic piece of legislation. I take this opportunity on behalf of myself and Ambassador Udra to express our sincere appreciation to all delegates for their support and constructive engagement in the process. In this regard, our work would not have been possible without the steadfast support of the United Nations Office for South-South Cooperation in facilitating our negotiations. We thank you. Excellencies, the 1978 Buenos Aires Plan of Action was an important step taken by developing countries to enhance cooperation among countries of the South and provide the platform for international community to support these development efforts. This is an occasion to recognize and underscore 40 years of collaborative initiatives among developing countries that have helped to improve the lives of millions across the Global South. Solidarity among peoples and countries of the Global South has contributed to the improvement of developing countries' national well-being and collective self-reliance. Together with what BAPA stressed as an important partnership with developed countries and multilateral agencies, now known as triangular cooperation, South-South cooperation has enhanced developing countries' capacity to attain national priorities and other international agreed development goals, especially the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, balancing economic, social, and environmental dimensions. The South's strong economic performance in the recent past has enabled southern countries to achieve important milestones in the reduction of poverty and extreme hunger, improved education and health, and other positive gains. We welcome the emergence of new southern financing sources, including regional development banks and other national development banks. The tremendous achievement of the South importantly include initiatives by developing and least developed countries which have themselves developed innovative successes in critical areas such as food security, access to information, and communication technologies, among others. Despite rapid progress of southern cooperation in scale, scope, dimension, challenges remain as southern countries, particularly LDCs, continue to face enormous development challenges in terms of high prevalence of poverty, malnutrition and unemployment, serious deficits in infrastructure and productive capacities, and the impact of external shocks. Excellencies, this conference is important in revitalizing our efforts to address these challenges through strong, broad-based partnerships based on international solidarity. We must seize this opportunity to exploit the full potential of South-South cooperation as complement to, not a substitute, to North-South cooperation. We have clearly laid out our expectations for the United Nations funds, programs, and specialized agencies to help achieve our goals, to help us share concrete solutions to support South-South cooperation by acting as catalysts for cooperation and strengthen the capacities of regional organizations. I note with appreciation that many United Nations entities have integrated South-South and triangular cooperation into their structured strategic frameworks or work plans and designed innovative South-South and triangular cooperation initiatives to benefit developing countries. I urge you, the United Nations, to intensify its support in facilitating access to knowledge and expertise of developing countries as a basis for applying South-South cooperation in the implementation of the 2030 Agenda. I encourage member states to continue engaging in policy dialogue within the High-Level Committee on South-South cooperation and further enhance South-South and triangular cooperation through sharing their homegrown successes with each other. Excellencies, we must employ our collective strength in identifying and tackling challenges specific to developing countries' circumstances. I am confident that this conference will result in the political impetus for us to start charting a strategic course together to ensure that the benefits of South-South and triangular cooperation impact the lives of people around the world. I thank you.
The President of the Designated Committee of High Level from Cooperation South-South, Mr. Abdo. Down, doy la palabra a la
I give the floor to Madam Atija Nawashish Ali Khan, Deputy Secretary General of the Islamic Chamber of Commerce, Industry, and Agriculture of Pakistan, who will speak in her capacity as representative of the private sector.
Your Excellency Jorge Marcelo Fori, Minister of Foreign Affairs and Worship of the Republic of Argentina, Your Excellency Ambassador Inga Ronda King, President of the Economic and Social Council, Mr. Achim Steiner, UNDP Administrator, Your Excellency Adonia Aibara, President-designate of the High-Level Committee of South-South Cooperation, Excellencies, Ministers, ladies and gentlemen. It is a momentous moment for all of us today to witness the 40 years of Buenos Aires Plan of Action. And we thank the people of Argentina under the leadership of His Excellency Mauricio Macri for giving us an opportunity to be in the beautiful country and the vibrant city of Buenos Aires. The concept of South-South cooperation has evolved and assumed several dimensions, focusing on mutual benefits for the achievement of national and collective self-reliance of the global South. A key component in this scenario is the private sector. It is the engine of growth which has played and will continue to play a vital role in the overall global economic agenda, and more importantly, in the strengthening and development of South-South and triangular cooperation. Private sector engagement in development process has been the center of the development agenda of many international organizations, which reflects the impact of the private sector as a driver of sustainable and inclusive economic growth, job creation, and poverty alleviation. However, for this engagement to be concrete and effective, the continuation of the governments in providing a conducive business and investment climate is essential, along with the strengthening of business intermediary and support organizations. It is also important to support developing countries through South-South and triangular cooperation for strengthening micro, small, and medium enterprises and creating an enabling environment, including sustainable industrialization. The private sector needs to be involved in public-private dialogue at the level of policy formulation and to be facilitated so that it be an implementing and financing partner. It needs to engage in investment, sustainable trade, and bring forth innovative and inclusive business models. A framework may be established to understand the needs of the private sector in the global South and to boost the potentials of the private sector as a driver of sustainable development. In line with the Addis Ababa Action Agenda, private sector partnerships need to be promoted to encourage greater international private financial partnership in development for the support of Agenda 2030. I thank you, Your Excellency. Thank you.
We are of the private sector.
I now give the floor to Madam Vitalish Meja, Executive Director of Reality of Aid Network Africa, as representative of civil society.
No, es una señora.
Your Excellency, Minister for Foreign Affairs, Argentina, Heads of State and Government, Your Excellency Ambassador Maria Fernanda Espinosa Garces, President of the 73rd session of the General Assembly, Your Excellency Ambassador Inga Roda King, President of the Economic and Social Council, Mr. Achim Steiner, UNDP Administrator, Your Excellency Adonia Ayebare, President-designate of the High-Level Committee on South-South Cooperation, Excellencies, Ministers, ladies and gentlemen. I have the pleasure to be among you today to give opening statement to the meeting of the second high-level United Nations Conference on South-South Cooperation. We are at crossroads. It has been more than 40 years since this agenda was brought forth. Let us celebrate this milestone. South-South cooperation and triangular cooperation is growing. We must also, however, be prepared to look at each other in the eye and ask ourselves tough questions. What have we achieved and for who? In doing so, we must go back to the basics, to the aspirations and the foundations of South-South cooperation. Ladies and gentlemen, South-South cooperation remains a manifestation of solidarity among peoples and countries of the South that contributes to their national well-being, national and collective self-reliance, and the attainment of development goals. It is a common endeavor of peoples of the South, born out of the shared experience and sympathies based on their common objectives and solidarity towards national development, self-reliance, and independence. It is a demonstration of solidarity between equals and a desire for mutual development. The partnerships of countries engaged in the South-South cooperation are characterized as horizontal, as it deviates from the traditional donor-recipient relationship. These assumptions imply that countries of the South are involved not in unbalanced relationships of power, but rather are collaborating as equals that mutually seek to engage in development cooperation. We must never lose these aspirations. We must never lose this focus. South-South cooperation remains a complementary and not a substitute to the North-South cooperation. We call on South-South cooperation actors to serve as an example and challenge North-South cooperation by holding its core principles while urging the North to deliver on their aid obligations, fulfill their development effectiveness commitments, and stop instrumentalization of aid for security and profit interests. Ladies and gentlemen, today the world faces extreme economic, gender, and political inequalities that require urgent and concrete policies and initiatives to be effectively reduced. South-South and triangular cooperation is well positioned to contribute to reduce inequalities all over the world. South-South cooperation should continue to be an instrument not just for implementing Agenda 2030, but more so for realizing its aspirations of national and collective genuine sustainable development goals, self-reliance, and independence. It should continue to be an expression of solidarity of the Global South. It should continue to enable developing countries to play a more active role in international policy and decision-making processes in support of their efforts to achieve sustainable development goals at the national and community level. We also call on South-South cooperation to play a key role in strengthening domestic resource mobilization at national level without taking away development resources from or imposing tax burdens on the poor. South-South cooperation should promote reforms to foster universal social protection coverage, build progressive fiscal systems, and ensure living wages for all as key tools for equality. It should prioritize financing for gender equality and women's rights, including financing women's rights organizations, especially from the Global South. In strengthening further invigorating the framework of South-South cooperation, we must seek to answer the following questions. For what and for whom? Answering this will make it easier for all to see if our actions are indeed relevant and serve the overall goal of the needs of the South, and that is the people. South-South cooperation should be achieving human development and equality within and between countries and between men and women, together with the reaffirmation of commitments on the 2030 agenda. At the heart of South-South cooperation, citizens must be at the heart. When talking about inclusiveness and multi-stakeholder partnerships, we must first and foremost endeavor to create institutional frameworks, spaces, and resources to ensure people's ownership of our aspiration, people's ownership of our initiatives and results. Citizens of the South must cease to be seen as beneficiaries, but as rights holders and as key actors of development. They should be included as key decision makers, planners, implementers, monitors, and evaluators of South-South cooperation programs and projects at all levels. We urge you to begin acknowledging and respecting CSOs as independent development actors, not just in words, but by deeds. By providing civil society organizations with the enabling environment to play the rightful role, from access to timely information, quality information, and access to official engagement spaces and financial resources. Above all, we call for the reversal of the global trends of closing civic space and putting an end to repression of civil society organizations so that they can effectively contribute to the goals and objectives of South-South cooperation. For South-South cooperation to be effective, we should promote peace, one that is based on justice and addresses the root causes of conflict by desisting from land grabbing, pursuance of extractive industry, or control of geostrategic locations. While one of the principles of South-South cooperation is non-interference on domestic affairs, we urge that there be a mechanism to ensure that South-South cooperation actors hold each other to account in promoting peace and preventing conflicts. To realize this, it is important that future investments of South-South cooperation pursue development agenda that puts people first, people's rights first, and ensure that decent work based on employment opportunities, respect of labor rights, social protection, social dialogue are in place. We urge that South-South cooperation adheres to the principles of transparency, accountability, and development results. On the other hand, in engaging private sector, we urge against letting the corporations and international financial institutions from interfering or influencing the decisions of the Southern governments. Their role in South-South cooperation should be decreased, if not immediately limited. They should be held accountable and required to comply with international standards, labor standards, responsible business conduct based on due diligence, and fiscal and social and environmental liability. On the other hand, we recognize the importance of the role of domestic private sector in the South, particularly micro, small, and medium enterprises, and call for their support so that they may contribute to sustainable national industrialization, support the modernization of sustainable agriculture, and achieve people-centered development and self-reliance. In involving private sector, it should be noted, however, that provision of essential services such as health, education, housing, water, and clean energy should remain the core responsibility of the government. Also, there needs to be a strong caution in developing public-private partnership arrangements with private sector. We recognize that South-South and triangular cooperation requires a robust, well-functioning United Nations system. We see the 75th anniversary of the United Nations in 2020 as an opportunity for stock-taking, a recommitment to multilateralism, and a consideration of measures to strengthen the organization. In this regard, we encourage all member states to engage with appointed co-facilitators and the General Assembly in preparation for the 25th Anniversary Summit. I thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
We thank the representative of the social civil society, y con esto hemos escuchado.
We have heard the last speaker for the opening segment of the conference. Distinguished heads of state and government, ministers, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, before proceeding to the consideration of the organizational items on the provisional agenda of the conference, delegations are informed that all official documents are also available on the conference website. The conference will now consider item 3 of the provisional agenda, entitled Adoption of the Rules of Procedure. Delegations have before them a note by the Secretariat issued as document A/Conf 235/2, containing the provisional rules of procedure of the conference. May I take it that the conference agrees to adopt the rules of procedure as contained in document A/conf 235/2? I hear no objections. It is so decided. The conference has thus concluded its consideration of Agenda Item 3. The conference will now consider Item 4 of the provisional agenda, entitled Adoption of the Agenda. I would like to draw the attention of delegations to document A/conf 235/1, which contains the provisional agenda for the conference. May I take it that the conference wishes to adopt the agenda as contained in document A/conf 235/1? I hear no objection. It is so decided. The conference has thus concluded its consideration of Agenda Item 4. The conference will now proceed to consider Item 5 of the agenda, entitled Election of Officers Other than the President. Under Rule 6 of the Rules of Procedure, the conference shall now elect from among representatives of participating states, and on the basis of ensuring the representative character of the General Committee, 9 vice presidents, one of whom shall be designated as Rapporteur General, and an ex officio vice president from the host country, Argentina. With regard to the election of the remaining vice presidents, I have been informed that there is general agreement among delegations to elect as vice presidents the following countries: from African states, Guinea and Morocco; from Asia-Pacific states, Bangladesh and the Islamic Republic of Iran; from Eastern European states, Estonia and Lithuania; from Latin American and Caribbean states, Brazil; from Western European and other states, Ireland. May I take it that the conference wishes to elect by acclamation Bangladesh, Brazil, Estonia, Guinea, Islamic Republic of Iran, Lithuania, Morocco, and as vice presidents by acclamation? I hear no objection. It is so decided. On behalf of the conference, I congratulate the vice presidents on their election. I now invite the conference to proceed with the designation of the Rapporteur General of the conference. I have been informed that there is a general understanding to designate His Excellency Sven Jurgensen, Permanent Representative of Estonia to the United Nations in New York, as Rapporteur General of the conference. May I take it that the conference wishes to designate His Excellency Sven Jurgensen of Estonia as Rapporteur General of the conference? I hear no objection. It is so decided. I congratulate Ambassador Jurgensen, and I wish him the very best on in his work as designated Rapporteur General of the conference. The conference has thus concluded the stage of its consideration of Agenda Item 5. The conference will now consider Item 6 of the agenda, entitled Organization of Work. The conference has before it a note by the Secretary General entitled Organizational and Procedural Matters, contained in document A/conf 235/4. May I take it that the conference wishes to approve the organization of work as contained in document circulated as A/Conf 235/4. I hear no objection. It is so decided. I now invite the conference to consider sub-item A of Agenda Item 7, entitled Appointment of Members of the Credentials Committee. Rule 4 of the Rules of Procedure provides that there shall be a Credentials Committee of 9 members appointed at the beginning of the conference, and that its composition shall be based on that of the Credentials Committee of the General Assembly of the United Nations at its 73rd session. The following 8 candidate states have confirmed that they are able to serve as members of the Credentials Committee: Antigua and Barbuda, Chile, China, Finland, Ghana, the Russian Federation, Sierra Leone, and the United States of America. There is one open seat, and the nomination will take place at a later date. May I take it that the conference wishes to appoint Antigua and Barbuda, Chile, China, Finland, Ghana, the Russian Federation, Sierra Leone, and the United States of America as members of the Credentials Committee of the conference? I hear no objection. It is so decided. Delegates are reminded that in accordance with the rules of procedure of the conference, and if they have not already done so, credentials issued by the head of state or government or by the Minister for Foreign Affairs, or in the case of the European Union, by the President of the European Commission, should be submitted to the Office of Legal Affairs, located in the Secretariat offices on level -2 of the Conference Center. The conference has thus concluded its consideration of item A of Agenda Item 7. We now move on to the opening of the general debate under Agenda Item 8. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, in accordance with the organization of work of the conference will now begin its general debate under Agenda Item 8. In accordance with the organization of work of the conference contained in document A/Conf 235/4, statements in the general debate should not exceed 5 minutes. Delegations are reminded that longer versions of their statements can be made available on the conference website.
Comenzando con la lista de oradores del debate general.
Beginning with the list of speakers of the general debate, I now have the honor to invite His Excellency, President of the Oriental Republic of Uruguay, Tabaré Vázquez, to take the floor.
Mr. President, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, I would like to greet all of you. Allow me to begin this intervention by mentioning 2 basic reasons why today and among you we feel so happy and we feel at home. The first reason is basically a domestic reason because Argentina and Uruguay, more than being neighbors, are brethren countries. Indeed, that is precisely what we are, Uruguayans and Argentinians. We're brothers. The second reason refers to the character and the aims of this conference, which has rightly been defined as the most representative and important event on cooperation among developing countries to continue moving forward on this path, along which the Buenos Aires Plan of Action is a very important milestone. Now, 40 years and many things have happened since the aforementioned plan was approved by the United Nations Conference on Technical Cooperation among Developing Countries, which was held in this beautiful and brethren city of Buenos Aires in 1978. Now, among these important events is that Argentina, Uruguay, and other countries of this region, who were then governed by cruel dictatorships, have regained their freedom and restored democracy. Now, this is not a minor detail. It's true that in the 40 years since the conference, our countries have adopted policies that promote South-South cooperation, and they've achieved a level of institutional development that has made it possible to develop specific normative frameworks or specific actions and programs, as well as a growing interconnection among the various actors involved. All that is true. However, also true, we've achieved this because we live in freedom and democracy. Freedom and democracy, which are not perfect, nor do they guarantee that everyone is happy, but they can always be improved upon, and they offer dignity to all. Ladies and gentlemen, in spite of the progress that we have achieved, there are still pending tasks in building a comprehensive policy of South-South cooperation. There are also new challenges to achieve this, and among these, the commitments undertaken in the 2030 Agenda, which is the most legitimate, the most sensible, and at the same time, the boldest agenda in today's world. It's legitimate because it was approved in September of 2015 by the United Nations General Assembly, which is the broadest and most representative forum in the world today. It is sensible because to eradicate hunger and poverty, to guarantee a healthy life and an inclusive education, to achieve gender equality, to ensure accessibility to services of water, sanitation, and energy, to promote economic development, just to mention some of the 17 goals and 169 targets. All this is not an issue of ideology. It is a matter of common sense and ethics. And it's also the boldest agenda because while the present contains various possible futures, the Sustainable Development Goals are a vision of the future that we'd like to see, or, which is the same but said in other words, the Sustainable Development Goals is a political program for humankind as a whole, and it is a broad challenge that we need to take up. Therefore, we consider this conference as an excellent opportunity to continue moving forward on various aspects related to South-South cooperation, and in particular, those that refer to its the character of this conference, its strategic goals, and implementation of that cooperation. Because in a world that is increasingly interdependent to confront the various challenges on a global scale, such as climate change, poverty, inequality, non-transmissible diseases, etc., for all this, international cooperation is essential as a vector for solidarity and transformation. Also, an indirect link to aforementioned, we believe that this is a meeting that will allow us to consider a very important and specific issue, and that is the assessment and measurement of development and the graduation of countries. Hence, we during the 73rd session, we would like to simply confirm what our country stated last September. We believe the current criteria are outdated and, in fact, are to the detriment of countries such as Uruguay, which are still developing but need a cooperation that has been redesigned and reorientated to help us achieve the sustainable development goals. I'm talking about technical cooperation, technological cooperation, exchange of knowledge. Ultimately, the agenda is very broad, it's demanding, and we will need to deal with that agenda without, of course, disregarding that international cooperation, although from a renewed perspective, South-South, is of course, very intimately related to the international system in which it is implemented. In a complex and interdependent context, there are various futures that are possible. However, none are perfect, but some are better than others. We need to continue working for the best future possible, a future for all, so that no one is left behind and that we all move forward together. And on this task, you can count on the modest contribution of Uruguay. We have developed various policies, such as the combat against the use of tobacco or national system of caring for our citizens, the transformation of our energy system. All this have led to international interest, and there are areas where Uruguay can share with other countries and contribute to sustainable global development through South-South and triangular cooperation. Also, Uruguay has achieved significant successes in introducing various pilot projects and innovative policies to achieve results in development, which has made it a strategic partner for international cooperation in all its modalities. Friends, ladies and gentlemen, the reality, as you know, is as it is, not as we desire it. To transform and improve reality, it's useless to deny it, or to fight it, or to complain it. We need to acknowledge it, analyze it, and even adapt to it. This conference could be an excellent testimony of our determination to continue improving reality on the basis of South-South and triangular cooperation as a means of effective implementation to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. Based on this conviction and on this confidence, I'm here on behalf of my nation, and I would like to extend to you a very warm greeting. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias al señor presidente.
I thank the President of Uruguay, Tabaré Vázquez, for his statement. I now have the honor to invite His Majesty King Smati III, Head of State of the Kingdom of Eswatini.
Is he coming? I hope so.
Your Excellency, President of Argentina, Her Excellency, the President of the General Assembly, Your Excellencies, Heads of State and Government, Secretary General of the United Nations, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. It is a great joy for me to be part of this second United Nations high-level conference on South-South cooperation to deliberate on how developing countries can cooperate in order to be able to implement the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals. We wish to thank the President, Government, and the people of Argentina for the warm welcome and hospitality extended to us since our arrival in this beautiful country. The conference has come at an opportunity time, since we are left with only 11 years before we reach the target date 2030. The theme role of South-South cooperation and implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, Challenges and Opportunities is highly appropriate because as developing countries, we shall be able to share the challenges we are faced with in the implementation of these universal goals. During the UN General Assembly in 2015, heads of state and government agreed to implement the SDG in order to achieve a better and sustainable future for all. We must show our commitment to fully address most of the SDGs, especially those relating to food security, clean water, education, health, inequality, jobs, land, and climate change. SDG 1 is all-encompassing and poverty is a cross-cutting issue. Addressing it will have a multiple effect in almost all the other sustainable development goals, ensuring that no one is left behind. We recognize that much has to be done to assist the Global South to have access to affordable, appropriate technologies to propel structural transformation of our world as underscored by the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. This will entail working together to undertake beneficiation and value addition on our primary products, as this is also the spirit of our regional economic bloc, SADC. Our concerted effort would leverage the competitive edge of the South within the global market and therefore enhance integration of the South into the global economy. Africa is also working towards the continental free trade area, which will enhance trade between our two regions. Every country and region possesses some unique advantage that needs to be exploited and shared across the global South through the South-South cooperation. Take, for instance, Argentina has made significant growth in its agricultural and ICT industries, and we hope to learn more from their experience in this enhanced and forum. It is imperative that we strive to work together to promote our collective interest within the global South and at the multilateral level, because we share a fundamental goal of poverty eradication and sustaining the development we want. Our strategic strength must be stimulated from our solidarity and unity in diversity. A high proportion of economies of the global South are anchored in agriculture, a sector where the main upkeep of the southern population is dependent. In the Kingdom of Eswatini, agriculture is the backbone of our economy. The majority of our people are farmers. We have both subsistence and commercial farmers. The agricultural sector provides a lifeline for many nations and is fundamental in ending hunger and poverty, particularly to the rural populations. It is also an important sector for value addition prospects. thus promoting products and market diversification as well as industrial development, among others. However, the effects of climate change continue to affect our farmers' production immensely. It is also having devastating effects on human lives, as witnessed with tropical cyclone Idea that has claimed the lives of hundreds of our fellow countrymen in Mozambique, Zimbabwe, and Malawi. Let us join hands to support initiatives to advert these strategies. We should therefore invest in appropriate technologies and innovations that would lead to increased agricultural productivity at the national, regional, and inter-regional levels in order to produce enough food for ourselves. The Global South is endowed with a vibrant demographic dividend of young people that need to be harnessed, supported, and empowered with the appropriate knowledge, skills, and technical know-how that would transform economies of the South. There is a need to create exchange programs for our youth to benefit from experiences from our cooperation. Currently, the Kingdom is encouraging our schools and tertiary institutions to design entrepreneurial curriculum. We believe such modalities will increase opportunities for young people to be competitive in the global job markets of the future, as well as integrate their skills into the global value chain. The integration initiatives concluded by the South continue to strengthen collective action in issues relating to the social, economic, political, cultural, and environmental dimensions of sustainable development. Integration has become an important catalyst to regional trade, investment, industrialization, and a stimulant to job creation, innovation, and technology advancement, among others. As developing nations, we need to promote trade amongst ourselves. Mr. President, let me take this opportunity to express Eswatini's profound appreciation to all countries and institutions that have continued to provide a major range of South cooperation modalities over the years. The Kingdom of Eswatini received financial support from our friends, the Republic of India, through the United Nations South Cooperation Facility to conduct a participatory poverty assessment, which was done in November and December 2018. The outcome of the assessment will feed into policy revision and program development for coming up with new intervention measures. Government takes seriously the poverty challenges and does not want to leave any citizen behind in its development agenda. I am pleased to inform this August Assembly that in July this year, government will be presenting a comprehensive report on the implementation of the SDGs during the high-level forum on sustainable development in New York. We are open to adoption of favorable national policies and regulations to promote cooperation that would leverage the pace towards achieving our national vision 2022, the 2030 UN Agenda, Africa's Agendas 2063, and other emerging global agendas. Thank you. May Almighty God bless us all.
Thank you, Your Majesty. Es el momento ahora.
The time has now come to give the floor to His Excellency, the President of Paraguay, Mario Abdo Benitez.
Foreign Minister Don Jorge Fori. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished delegates, distinguished presidents, Madam President of the United Nations General Assembly, ministers, ladies and gentlemen, 40 years have passed since the adoption of the Buenos Aires Plan of Action, which was ambitiously designed to promote and implement technical cooperation, which today we call South-South cooperation, highlighting its potential as an inexhaustible source of exchange to learn from each other, build capacities, and ultimately to contribute to our development. Now, to meet again today in this city in order to take stock of the path covered over the past 4 decades, and as a result of this, to recalibrate our efforts and goals in this area. Well, this is an extremely important event, and my country simply couldn't skip such an event. Paraguay is convinced that international cooperation, and in particular South-South cooperation, is meant to play a strategic role in the current international landscape, and it will make it possible to achieve development as guided by the 2030 Agenda, the Addis Ababa Plan of Action on Financing for Development, and the Paris Agreement on Climate Change. Now, we trust that this multilateral forum is an excellent opportunity to exchange experiences, to learn from each other, to take on responsibilities, and to share resources to move towards the much yearned for sustainable development. The global reality that we are living in more than ever requires us to rely on coordination and international cooperation to tackle the major challenges that humankind confronts. And we as leaders are called upon to resolve some of these challenges: peace and international peace and security, the eradication of poverty and hunger, health care, upholding human rights in full, as well as such challenges as climate change, education for development, migrations, and the scientific, technological, and digital gap. Each country confronts specific challenges in its path towards sustainable development. Among these countries are landlocked developing countries, that as is the case of Paraguay. The specific geographical location of these countries imposes specific challenges on us. These challenges confirm the theory that the development of a country cannot simply be measured, as I've always stated, simply by its gross domestic product. Rather, it should be contemplated in a much broader approach that considers structural gaps. We consider that international cooperation is the best instrument to build strategic partnerships. In Paraguay, it's a central component of our foreign policy because it has been and continues to be fundamental in the process of developing infrastructure, fostering our economy, and diversifying our trade. Paraguay has developed its own capacities and has designed public policies and systems, and it has moved from being exclusively a recipient of cooperation to being a country that also actively offers cooperation with a catalog of South-South cooperation that covers 15 different programs, including fishing, organic agriculture, hydroelectric energy, rural tourism, community-based development, human rights, and others. Indeed, it is very satisfying for me to present in this conference, high-level conference, a system of monitoring of recommendations in the area of human rights developed by my country with the title More Plus. This platform was designed to ensure the monitoring, follow-up, and control of state activities related to recommendations received from human rights treaty bodies, and has a network of 70 focal points that cover all state institutions. The system is also aligned with the 2030 agenda, and it is an important tool to ensure that public policies have a human rights focus. This program also has obtained the support of the United Nations Office of High Commissioner for Human Rights of the United Nations, and also has so far been adopted and embraced by the Dominican Republic, Chile, Uruguay, Argentina, Honduras, Guatemala, and the Inter-American Commission of Human Rights, and soon it will be also adopted by Costa Rica. What better opportunity than this conference, ladies and gentlemen delegates, the commemoration of the 40th anniversary of the Buenos Aires Plan of Action. What better opportunity than to examine the growth, increase, and the growing impact of this means of cooperation, whose contribution to development is not yet as tangible as it could be. In conclusion, I would like to express my wish that in a very brief time we'll have a third high-level conference similar to this one to evaluate the results that have been achieved as a consequence of the decisions that we will approve today, and that as a result of that conference, South-South and triangular cooperation will be further consolidated and considered as very effective tools for the development and the well-being of our societies. The transformations underway are irreversible. It is essential to keep working to achieve a more equitable world. We can share our experience and our knowledge and our solidarity based on a number of guiding principles. We have to continue building international relations based on principles, such principles as freedom, democracy, and solidarity. I would like to thank you for the opportunity to speak here for this wonderful event. I would like to congratulate the President of Argentina and friend Mauricio Macri, and thank Argentina for the excellent organization of this extremely important event, which will no doubt make an important contribution to the development of our nations. I have no doubt. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, President of Paraguay.
Corresponde el turno para de uso de la
I now give the floor to Her Excellency Kersti Kejulai, President of the Republic of Estonia.
I can go ahead.
Excellencies, distinguished heads of states and governments, ministers, ladies, gentlemen. Firstly, let me thank Argentina for hosting the second United Nations High-Level Conference on South-South cooperation. Thank you also for a warm welcome here in Buenos Aires. South-South cooperation has just reached an important milestone. 40 years since the Buenos Aires Plan of Action for promoting and implementing technical cooperation among developing countries. At the time, it created a milestone platform for sharing experiences between developing countries. We can even say it was an innovative endeavor at that time, but we have come a long way since 1978. We acknowledge that many countries have similar development concerns, circumstances and contexts, historical, political, economic, environmental and social. Therefore, South-South and triangular cooperation have become an inseparable part of the bigger development cooperation architecture. When it comes to my own country, Estonia, we were a newly independent country in transition just 30 years ago, exactly at the situation many developing countries find themselves today. We were struggling to find our way to create a better future for our people. We are very grateful for our partners and like-minded democracies for all their support they gave us. Learning from others' experiences was useful, but the key to success was finding our own solutions according to our own needs and own challenges. We believe that innovation and digitalization has a crucial role in achieving sustainable development goals more rapidly. This is why Estonia particularly appreciates the reference to the application of ICT within the outcome document of this conference. Of course, there is also another side of digitalization, cybersecurity, that we have to tackle together, all countries together, including in the United Nations and particularly in United Nations Security Council through direct approach to cybersecurity in conflict resolution. Absolutely every country needs to develop solutions that work best in their culture and their society. Estonia has surpassed the status of a country receiving aid, and now we are eager to help. We want to contribute. We work through our development cooperation initiatives, for example, through the Estonian e-Governance Academy that was established in cooperation with UNDP. Together with the UNDP, we develop a practical tool for rapid assessment of digital development needs of individual countries. We appreciate that the UNDP, as a host to the United Nations Office for South-South Cooperation, will share this knowledge globally. We also cooperate on digitalization regionally, such as through the African Union and together with Australia with the Pacific Island states. We are active bilaterally in a number of Caribbean countries and would like to strengthen regional aspects through close relationship with CARICOM. Partnerships between the government and business sector have been one of the key factors for our success. We learned early on that to allow all sectors to develop, we need to engage with all stakeholders, including civil society, private sector, volunteers, academia, scientific and technological communities, foundations, think tanks, to name a few. To fill the gap between the analysis of the digital and practical implementation, we have found that it is not enough to cooperate and to work only with all the stakeholders. We need to start finding the resources to help countries seeking to leapfrog using digital, to help them to develop quicker. Estonia established the Global Digital Development Foundation just a few days ago. The mission of this foundation is to assist developing countries to establish digital societies. This foundation is open for investments from international organizations, countries, and also private enterprises. And we will promise you all here that to approach this foundation in the future, will not be overly bureaucratic. It will be the perfect tool of realizing your digital dreams. Developing countries can seek finances if they want to develop a digital society. Estonia has also, in accordance with our commitment to the Paris Agreement and international climate cooperation, decided to provide €1 million annually until 2020 to SIDS and other developing countries to alleviate the effects of climate change through the use of new technologies and knowledge. From the money we received from the sales of the CO2 quota, Estonia has established an environment investment center, and this has already chosen the first projects to be supported in exporting smart climate and environment-related solutions to developing countries. Let's continue to work together, think together, save our planet together, and work for our people together. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Madam President. Es el turno.
Now, I would like to give the floor His Excellency Vice President of the State Council of China, His Excellency Chunghwa Hu.
His Excellency Mr. Mauricio Macri, President of the Argentine Republic and President of the Conference. Your Excellency Madam Maria Fernanda Espinosa Garces, President of the UN General Assembly. Your Excellency Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres. Dear delegates, it's a singular pleasure for me to join all of you in this beautiful city of Buenos Aires on this occasion to discuss a topic of great importance, South-South cooperation. At present, there remains a striking imbalance in development when we look around the world, and developing countries continue to face an uphill struggle in growing their economies and giving their people a better life. Focusing on the opportunities and challenges facing South-South cooperation, this conference is of great significance to sustained and deeper South-South cooperation by pooling the wisdom and strength of all parties. China is a staunch supporter of, an active player in, and an important contributor to South-South cooperation to date. Catering to the needs of different countries, China has provided a total of 166 countries and international organizations with over RMB 400 billion yuan's worth of assistance to help the recipient countries implement more than 5,000 projects and programs in various categories. Last year, China's trade with other developing countries amounted to $1.77 trillion. And our investment in the developing world reached $29.1 billion. In particular, since His Excellency President Xi Jinping attended the UN Sustainable Development Summit in 2015, China has been actively engaged in South-South cooperation through such means as trade, investment and financing, productive capacity cooperation, and training, thus greatly enriching both the agenda and the practice of cooperation. In that process, we have been honoring the very values of South-South cooperation, namely pursuing both the greater good and shared interests and giving precedence to the greater good. China is firmly committed to multilateralism and the multilateral institutional architecture with the UN at the very center. China firmly defends the fundamental principles of South-South cooperation, namely sovereignty, equality, and mutual benefit, and non-interference in other countries' internal affairs. To better develop South-South cooperation, China would like to highlight the following. First, South-South cooperation is a common undertaking of all developing countries. This undertaking is based on equal, mutually beneficial, and win-win relations, and is a product of developing countries' common aspirations and quests for development. When confronted with development challenges, developing countries should actively engage in policy communication, coordinate their positions, and seek common ground while resolving differences to create strong synergy for development. Second, South-South cooperation should expand into more fields. South-South cooperation has a rich agenda, and much can be done in a broad range of areas, including trade, investment, finance, infrastructure, and the environment. Infrastructure connectivity should be further enhanced among countries and cooperation intensified in inter alia, agriculture, energy, science and technology, digital economy, and e-commerce, so that such cooperation can be broadened and deepened continuously. Third, innovative transformation is needed for the modalities of South-South cooperation. In the developing world, national circumstances vary from country to country in many ways. Countries should be encouraged to involve themselves in South-South cooperation in the most suitable manner that befits their endowments, capacities, and levels of development. Trilateral cooperation, public-private partnership, and industrial capacity cooperation should be vigorously promoted by launching a series of highly successful projects that can lead, steer, and inspire. Fourth, South-South cooperation is there to complement, not to substitute, South-North cooperation. In the grand scheme of international development cooperation, South-North cooperation remains the primary channel. So developed countries should honor their ODA commitments in good faith with more tangible actions. As a useful complement to South-North cooperation, South-South cooperation does also have an active role to play. But instead of replicating the principles and criteria of South-North cooperation, it should be grounded in reality and pushed ahead in an independent and flexible manner. Dear delegates, this year marks the 70th anniversary of the founding of the People's Republic of China. The past 7 decades has witnessed tremendous achievements in China's development. But the fact remains that China is the world's largest developing country. Today, China ranks below the 70th place in the world in terms of per capita GDP. As at the end of 2018, 16.6 million rural residents in China were still living in poverty. Like the rest of the developing world, China is also confronted with daunting development-related challenges. China's development has benefited from the support and cooperation of the international community. We are also ready to do what we can to the best of our ability to shoulder such responsibilities as commensurate with our stage of development and our actual capacity by working hand in hand with other countries to build a community of shared future for humankind. 1. We shall help more products from fellow developing countries access the Chinese market. China is opening its door wider and wider to the world, providing fellow developing countries with more and more market opportunities. Our zero tariff treatment will continue for imports from the LDCs to encourage them to export more to China. China is ready to actively negotiate and conclude FTAs with other developing countries in a joint endeavor to promote trade liberalization and facilitation. Last year, we successfully held the first China International Import Expo, or CIIE. The second CIIE will take place this year, and again, exhibitors from the LDCs can showcase their products free of charge. We are looking forward to seeing more goods from fellow developing countries on the Chinese market. 2, we shall encourage and expand investment in fellow developing countries. Industrial capacity cooperation between China and other developing countries is yielding positive results. We shall continue to encourage well-positioned and reputable Chinese firms to invest and do business in other developing countries, to enhance cooperation in such areas as infrastructure, clean energy, information communications, and environmental protection, and facilitate the joint creation of trade and economic cooperation zones. We shall follow through in good faith on the commitment made by President Xi Jinping and strive to invest more than $12 billion in the LDCs by 2030. 3, we shall optimize the modalities of assistance to make it more effective. In order to further step up international assistance, the China International Development Cooperation Agency was established last year. Leveraging our advantages, we shall remain focused on such priority sectors as poverty reduction, agriculture, health, infrastructure, skills training, and education. and help ensure that assistance funds are better spent with due attention to financial sustainability. We are happy to share our development experience with the recipient countries, help them improve their people's livelihood, and enhance their self-reliant development capacity in a tangible way. 4, we shall make optimal use of various platforms for multilateral cooperation. China stands ready to work with all parties to actively promote international cooperation under the Belt and Road Initiative and the principle of consultation and cooperation for shared benefits, and give wide scope to the United Nations and various other multilateral and regional cooperation mechanisms. The second Belt and Road Forum for International Cooperation will take place in Beijing next month. It is set to inject a fresh impetus into South-South cooperation. Dear delegates, never before have the destinies of all the peoples around the world been so closely linked as they are today. South-South cooperation provides an important solution for developing countries in their joint effort to tackle development challenges. It is a solution with great prospects. We hope that this conference, with the contributions of all participants, will arrive at greater, wider consensus and provide a solid foundation for the implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. I'm confident that the fruits of South-South cooperation will be ever more abundant and the road ahead will be ever broadening. I wish this conference a resounding success. Thank you.
Gracias, señor vicepresidente.
I thank the First Deputy Minister, and I now give the floor to the Minister of Foreign Affairs and First Deputy Prime Minister of the Republic of Serbia, Ivica Dačić.
Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, at the outset I would like to thank the Argentine Republic for the warm welcome and excellent organization of this important event. It is my great pleasure to have the opportunity to once again visit the country with which the Republic of Serbia has traditionally fostered and maintained excellent relations with full understanding and mutual support on issues of vital importance. It is my honor to address this important UN conference on South-South cooperation, a segment which has over the past 40 years, following the adoption of the Buenos Aires Plan of Action in 1978, continuously promoted cooperation and constantly engaged new stakeholders, thus establishing itself as an important factor in the process of promoting political and economic relations, as well as a successful model for international cooperation on sustainable development. Today, more than ever before, the achievement of sustainable development goals on a global level is intertwined with the role and impact of fast-growing economies and the developing countries. I would like to underline that convening of this second high-level UN conference on South-South cooperation is a testimony to the contribution made by the South-South cooperation in terms of the exchange of experience, expertise, and technologies among developing countries, as well as the triangular cooperation including developing countries. The Republic of Serbia has an interest to develop all-round cooperation with the countries participating in the South-South cooperation process. As a country currently in the process of European integration, but also as one of the founders of the non-aligned movement, we are particularly heartened by the development on triangular cooperation on the joint work being done by partners from both developed and developing countries. The Republic of Serbia will continue to strongly advocate for strengthening multilateralism, the UN system, and international solidarity, while respecting at the same time sovereign equality of all member states of the United Nations. I would like to take this opportunity to thank once again many countries which have not recognized the unilateral declaration of independence of so-called Kosovo in support of the preservation of the territorial integrity and sovereignty of the Republic of Serbia. By doing so, they have demonstrated their commitment to the principles of international law, the Charter of the United Nations, and the UN Security Council Resolution 1244. The Republic of Serbia is consistent in its position that contains issues must be resolved only by full compliance with these principles and the documents and through dialogue aimed at reaching compromise and durable solutions. I am deeply convinced that only consistent and principled positions are a guarantee that the rights of small and less developed countries will be observed in similar circumstances in the future. It is of particular importance that the attention of this conference is focused on the implementation of 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, a strategic document, the implementation of which should make the world more just and more human for all. This will once again reaffirm the indispensable role of the United Nations systems as a global forum for dealing with matters and challenges of universal significance, such as the Sustainable Development Goals to which both the developed and developing countries aspire equally. The Republic of Serbia is committed to the implementation of all Sustainable Development Goals, in particular among the young regarding economic growth, enjoyment of full gender equality, and empowerment of women and young girls. Our country is currently undergoing a process of economic reforms aimed at creating durable political and economic stability. Dynamic work on bringing the agenda in line with our priorities, as well as with the chapters in our pre-accession negotiation with the European Union, are extremely important in this process. The Republic of Serbia is ready to join all partners, including the organization and agencies of the UN system, civil society and private sector, in searching for best answers to issues facing the region of Southeast Europe and the international community at large. We are committed to finding solutions to common challenges in our region, through cooperation in the protection of the environment, sustainable use of water and energy, promotion of transport infrastructure, agriculture, transfer of technology, trade and investment, innovation, science and information and communication technologies. The Republic of Serbia considers that only on the basis of joint action and peaceful cooperation, which are the fundamental principles characterizing South-South cooperation, the Republic of Serbia and other countries of our region can achieve their common goal of creating a peaceful, stable, sustainable, and a prosperous environment. I am confident that this conference will give an important impulse in this direction, and I wish you all success in your full deliberations. Thank you very much.
I thank His Excellency Ivica Dakic, First Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Serbia, for his statement. Now I have the privilege to give the floor to His Excellency Riyad Al-Maliki, Minister for Foreign Affairs of the State of Palestine, and he will speak on behalf of Group of 77 and China. Minister, you have the floor.
Mr. President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I'm deeply honored and privileged to deliver this statement on behalf of the Group of 77 and China in the opening ceremony of the Second United Nations High-Level Conference on South-South Cooperation. At the outset, I would like to express our profound thanks and appreciation to the government and people of Argentina for hosting this important conference and for warmly welcoming us here in Buenos Aires. 40 years ago, we gathered here in this beautiful city, Buenos Aires, and adopted the Buenos Aires Plan of Action, BAPA, which was the major landmark for the technical cooperation among developing countries. Today, we are gathering here again to review trends, assess progress, review lessons learned, and identify challenges with a view to enhance the current institutional arrangements to effectively support South-South cooperation and promote South-South agenda, and aiming at stepping up South-South cooperation contribution to the ambitious goal of eradicating poverty in all its forms and dimensions, taking advantage of the significant achievements by developing countries. For the past few decades, we have witnessed the expansion of South-South cooperation, evolving at different levels and provided innovative approaches for collective actions and strengthened its contribution to sustainable development in its three dimensions. The group notes with appreciation the expansion of intra- and inter-regional South-South cooperation initiatives and summits that have set strategies and agendas, enhanced policy coordination, and launched joint ventures that have strengthened South-South trade, investment, infrastructure development, and capacity development. The group strongly believes that South-South cooperation offers opportunities and supports our efforts to strengthen international cooperation to achieve the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. The main multilateral consensus, which reaffirms the global development commitment and calls for complementing national efforts to achieve the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. In this regard, the group emphasizes that South-South cooperation is a complement to and not a substitute for North-South cooperation, which remains the main channel for international development cooperation. We highlight that the principles that have guided South-South cooperation remain valid. And as reiterated by our ministers, the group stresses that South-South cooperation should continue to be guided by the following well-established principles, references, and goals. A, South-South cooperation is a common endeavor of peoples and countries of the South and must be pursued as an expression of South-South solidarity and a strategy for economic independence and self-reliance of the South based on their common objectives and solidarity. B, South-South cooperation and this agenda must be driven by the countries of the South. C, South-South cooperation must not be seen as a replacement of North-South cooperation. Strengthening South-South cooperation must not be a measure of coping with the receding interest of the developed world in assisting developing countries. D, cooperation between countries of the South must not be analyzed and evaluated using the same standards as those used for North-South relations. E, financial contributions from other developing countries should not be seen as official development assistance from these countries to other countries of the South. These are merely expressions of solidarity born out of shared experiences and sympathies. F, South-South cooperation is a development agenda based on premises, conditions, and objectives that are specific to the historic and political context of developing countries and to their needs and expectations. South-South cooperation deserves its own separate and independent promotion. G, South-South cooperation is based on strong, genuine, broad-based partnership and solidarity. H, South-South cooperation is based on complete equality, mutual respect, and mutual benefit. I, South-South cooperation respects national sovereignty in the context of shared responsibility. J, South-South cooperation strives for strengthened multilateralism in the promotion of an action-oriented approach to development challenges. K, South-South cooperation promotes the exchange of best practices and support among developing countries in the common pursuit of their broad development objectives encompassing all development-related aspects of international relations and not just in the traditional economic and technical areas. L, South-South cooperation is based on the collective self-reliance of developing countries. M, South-South cooperation seeks to enable developing countries to play a more active role in international policy and decision-making processes in support of their efforts to achieve sustainable development. And the modalities and mechanisms for promoting South-South cooperation are based on bilateral, sub-regional, regional, and inter-regional cooperation and integration, as well as multilateral cooperation. The group recognizes that BAPA plus 40 offers the opportunity to have an honest discussion on the importance of advancing the sharing of knowledge and experiences with a view to showcase its contribution to sustainable development. However, this work must be carried out taking into account the particularities of the South-South cooperation and in accordance with national capabilities. The group reiterates that South-South cooperation is built on voluntary and demand-driven nature, lower transaction cost with no conditionality, taking advantage of the similarities and relevant know-how among developing countries, real and proven development expertise valued by the southern countries. Furthermore, South-South cooperation cannot be measured or assessed in the same way as ODA, as its value goes beyond direct and indirect costs. We also emphasize that the spread of South-South cooperation shall not reduce the commitment of developed countries to reach 0.7% of their GNIs as their official development assistance to developing countries. Furthermore, the group would like to recall the importance of triangular cooperation and acknowledges that triangular cooperation is aimed at facilitating, supporting, and enhancing South-South initiatives through the provision of inter alia funding, capacity building, technology transfer, as well as other forms of support at the request of developing countries in line with the principles of South-South cooperation and must be led by the countries of the South. The group emphasizes the pursuit of win-win cooperation for global development on the basis of extensive consultation, joint contribution, and shared benefits, which can bring huge gains to all countries and all parts of the world in building a community of shared future for humankind. The group reaffirms the commitment to promote a universal, transparent, rules-based, open, non-discriminatory, inclusive, and equitable multilateral trading system under the World Trade Organization, and are determined to work together to further strengthen the WTO and fight all forms of protectionism. Also, the group recognizes the significant contribution of South-South cooperation in the area of trade and its ability to promote sustainable development among developing countries, and in this regard, we reaffirm the importance of strengthening South-South trade cooperation arrangements, including preferential trade and investment arrangement and the global system of trade preferences among developing countries. In this connection, the relevant United Nations organizations, including UNCTAD, must continue to support developing countries in deepening and enlarging South-South trade integration, regional, sub-regional, and inter-regional economic integration and cooperation arrangements. We encourage the developed countries members that have not yet done so, and developing countries members declaring themselves in a position to do so, to provide duty-free and quota-free market access to all products from all LDCs, in line with the World Trade Organization decisions and the ministerial decision on preferential rules of origin for least developed countries agreed at the 9th and 10th the WTO ministerial conferences. The group remains deeply concerned with the increase in the unilateral and protectionist measures that will not only undermine the multilateral trading system, but also will lead to negative impact on access of the developing countries' exports to the global markets. The group understands that the 2030 agenda represents a change of the development paradigm that prevailed in the last decades, since it recognizes that development is much more than economic growth. In that sense, the group recognizes the multidimensional nature of poverty and the social, economic, and environmental dimensions of domestic output and structural gaps at all levels, and further recognizes the need for international development cooperation to include a multidimensional perspective that transcends the use of per capita income as the sole indicator to measure development, in order to support all developing countries to achieve sustainable development, while acknowledging the serious and continuous, as well as the new and emerging challenges that developing countries face. The group believes that BAPA plus 40 gives us the opportunity to reaffirm our strong support to the High-Level Committee on South-South Cooperation and to the United Nations Office for South-South Cooperation, UNOSC. We stress that the office is the articulator of South-South cooperation in the United Nations system. The group appreciates the countries of the South who have stepped up their cooperation with UNOSC, which has also enhanced its role and impact by upscaling it in terms of financial, human, and budgetary resources for the achievement of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. In closing, the group hopes that BAPA plus 40 will constitute itself in a multilateral consensus that will allow to boost our South-South cooperation initiatives. Now, with your permission, Mr. President, I will, in my national capacity, deliver a short statement of my country, the State of Palestine. It will be in Arabic. Sayyid al-Rais, Ashab al
Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, Your Excellencies, it gives me great pleasure to deliver to you the salutations of the Palestinian people and leadership, and we hope that this important conference would be a success as a further expression of the importance of multilateralism and its legal framework that is based on respect for national sovereignty and cooperation for the good of humanity and mankind. We also would like to express our thanks to the friendly state of Argentina, people and government for hosting this conference as it did 40 years ago with a great spirit of generosity. Ladies and gentlemen, now in 40 years since the Buenos Aires conference has started, which was a landmark in the history of cooperation, we return once again to evaluate this important experience and to determine the challenges and obstacles that stand in the face of our achieving our aspirational goals of sustainable development. Cooperation between the countries of the South has grown and developed, and it was based on some important elements, including a commitment to collective development, enhancing the freedom of humankind, and opposing colonialism, as well as putting equality for living in peace amongst all states. The outcomes of all the development conferences and sustainable development conferences have stressed the difficulty of achieving development under occupation, under colonialization, and we in Palestine are confronting this challenge on a daily basis because of the Israeli colonialist occupation, which has lasted for the past 52 years. And assisting and helping people to overthrow occupation as the biggest obstacle to development, and especially sustainable development, and a major obstacle to people's ability to exercise their right to self-determination is a duty upon the shoulders of the international community. It is important for the international community to shoulder its responsibility to end Israeli occupation as the biggest obstacle to achieving stability and development in the Middle East as a whole, and specifically for international peace and security as well. Ladies and gentlemen, despite this, the State of Palestine continues to work diligently on entrenching the foundations of the State of Palestine, which is based on laws and international consensus, and enhancing development with friendly states. We affirm the importance of South-South cooperation and North-South cooperation. Therefore, we have founded the Palestinian Agency for International Cooperation, PICA, by a decision made by the Palestinian President as a diplomatic tool and an important element to implement the policy of the Foreign Ministry of Palestine. Through it, the State of Palestine aims to offer development assistance and technical support to states, especially friendly states that support the Palestinian people. And this is based on our belief, our stringent belief in our national responsibility towards these states, and it's an expression of our appreciation for the support that is being given to the State of Palestine from the international community and its agenda. We have made many contributions at the international level in coordinating aid operations and humanitarian assistance and developmental assistance, and in implementing bilateral and trilateral and multilateral cooperation programs in all different fields, especially in education and healthcare and the environment and agriculture. Mr. Chair, ladies and gentlemen, our highest goals of sustainable development in all its dimensions and human rights, and enhancing the international multilateral system that is based on international law, will not be achieved without taking practical steps, and we should not simply stop at making statements and delivering speeches. Rather, we must put practical plans in order to implement what we agree on, including the Buenos Aires Plan of Action, and we must not leave anyone behind. We are strong in our unity despite our diversity, and the State of Palestine will contribute alongside you to achieve what we agree on in order to serve the highest interest of our planet, of our peoples, and to uphold our joint principles. I thank you, sir, and I apologize for speaking at length.
I thank His Excellency Riyad Al-Maliki, Minister for Foreign Affairs of the State of Palestine, who spoke on behalf of the Group of 77 and China, plus on his own country's platform. Now, before proceeding to the next speaker, I would like to remind delegations of the agreed time limit of 5 minutes. Speakers with longer statements are encouraged to read a shorter version of the text and to submit the full length of the statement to the Secretariat for posting on the conference website. Now I have the privilege to give the floor to His Excellency Manuel Ventura, Minister for Foreign Affairs and Worship of Costa Rica. He will speak on behalf of the like-minded group of countries, supporters of middle-income countries. You have the floor, sir.
Señor Presidente.
Mr. President, Excellencies, I would like to inform you that I will first make Costa Rica's statement in its national capacity, and then that of the group of countries, supporters of middle-income countries. Allow me to begin by congratulating yourself and the other members of the Bureau upon your election to lead this important event, and to thank the government of Argentina for their warm hospitality in this beautiful city of Buenos Aires, where today we happily celebrate 40 years of a turning point in the history of what we now know as South-South cooperation, with the approval of the Buenos Aires Plan of Action to promote and realize technical cooperation between developing countries. This was the result of the United Nations Conference on Technical Cooperation between Developing Countries, held in this very city in 1978 to promote this form of cooperation. I also wish to acknowledge the United Nations for the work in organizing this global meeting of unmeasurable projection. My delegation supports the statement the delegation of Palestine made on behalf of the Group of 77 in China, as well as the common position of the member countries of the Central America integration system to be made by the delegation of Guatemala in its role as pro tempore president. Costa Rica is a small country. It is located on the belt of the Americas. It adopted a different way of dealing with its development by abolishing the army in 1949 and by redirecting those resources to the comprehensive development of the country. At present, 8% of the national budget is devoted to education by constitutional mandate, 6% to the judiciary, 9.9% to health. Almost 30% of Costa Rican territory has been declared a national reserve protected by the state. As a happy result of these decisions, in Costa Rica, the Human Development Index has continued to grow since 1980. It is in the high-level category. We are leaders in the promotion and protection of human rights, civil and political rights, economic, social, and cultural rights, environmental rights, and the right to peace. We stress that the indivisible, interdependent, universal rights are intrinsic to those rights and our vision of sustainable development. Many of the strengths we share today with other countries of the South set out in the specialized catalogs on population and development, environment, climate change, childhood and adolescence are related to this accumulation of knowledge and experience implemented in our development model, associated to the Sustainable Development Goals, which are enshrined in Agenda 2030. It is important to stress that this heritage of strength Costa Rica has for South-South cooperation, as well as its experience in the processes to manage this cooperation, has been internationally acknowledged through the trust shown by countries like Spain and Germany, organizations like the European Union and specialized bodies of the United Nations, to convey our know-how, experience, and technical skills to other countries with a lesser or similar relative development, using the triangular cooperation modality, by means of which Costa Rica has linked with countries of Latin America, the Caribbean, and Africa, especially in projects on the environment and climate change. Mr. President, in our region of Latin America, South-South cooperation is increasingly dynamic. It responds to the concentration of a larger number of middle-income countries. The development of the region as a receiver, or rather the movement of the region from the position of a receiver of official development assistance to a set of middle-income countries, and the stress on the management of a modality as both a provider and receiver of international technical cooperation. The focus to measure development fundamentally in terms of income has made so-called middle-income countries, including 109 countries of the South, where 70% of the world population lives, and where there are 73% of the world's poor, have stopped being participants in the major flows for international cooperation. This is a bad sign. It penalizes the development of several nations which have done the work with responsibility, persistence, and transparency, and which should instead generate incentives to stimulate development and cooperation. For this reason, we stress the need to review this methodology and create a broader base to measure this development, such as the use of the concept of multidimensional poverty, the focus on structural gaps proposed by CEPAL, or the assessment of the Human Development Index of the UNDP. Mr. President, one of the main contributions of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development is the definition of development through a multidimensional perspective for all countries. It has a cross-cutting narrative of sustainability, inclusion, and equality, and it establishes principles and fundamental values orienting actions for the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. The main axis of these principles is focused on humans to whom we owe it as decision-makers, leaving no one behind. Common, shared but differentiated responsibilities between developed and developing countries, the interdependence and indivisibility of the SDGs, and the universality of the commitments made, considering the different realities of all states, their resources and available capacity, as well as their policies and national development priorities, should be our guiding star. In this new paradigm for sustainable development, South-South cooperation and triangular cooperation are an effective means to implement and achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. This is what we have recognized together with our partners in multilateral fora, debating development issues, particularly in the Community of Latin American and Caribbean States, or CELAC, and in the Ibero-American region. This is where we have built a shared position based on defense of the principles of South-South cooperation. The 10 years of the South-South cooperation reports in Ibero-America document this process. The 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development is an opportunity for South-South cooperation to act as a complement to the work of North-South cooperation to achieve the SDGs. In this vein, South-South cooperation has added value when it comes to contributing to achieving the success of the national frameworks for the SDGs. Specifically, Latin America and the Caribbean have a trove of experience, a compilation of public policy, and a vast background of cooperation, which are substantive inputs for the implementation of the 2030 Agenda. For decades, the countries of the South have had the advantage of working in the areas in the 17 Sustainable Development Goals: education, health, food security, gender equality, access to justice, decent work, water and sanitation, energy, industrialization and innovation, and the fight against climate change, amongst other things. Among the challenges for South-South cooperation related to the implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, we can specifically identify the following. The drive for regional cooperation to encourage South-South cooperation and triangular cooperation in the implementation of the 2030 Agenda. In this vein, regional spaces are a platform and a reference for the dialogue that is to be promoted in the framework of the revitalized World Alliance. The use of institutional frameworks on more inclusive alliances, encouraging dialogue between South-South cooperation and traditional cooperation through triangular cooperation. In particular, this means of cooperation is a complement to the ability to intervene in projects between countries of the South by providing financial and technical resources. Developing multi-stakeholder alliances in the framework of programs and projects for South-South cooperation and triangular cooperation to strengthen the means of implementation for the 2030 Agenda and include practices with innovative strategies. The development of the South-South decentralized cooperation to bring the 2030 Agenda to the territorial level by exchanging knowledge and experience to bolster processes of local development through a focus on the institutions for international cooperation of the state in order to create synergies. The development of a strategic framework for South-South cooperation and triangular cooperation in the sectors of science, technology, and innovation in order to promote progress towards more advanced sectors in the knowledge area, creating incentives for diversifying production and generating quality jobs, sustainable production, and international competitivity. Mr. President, Your Excellencies, Costa Rica is focusing on multilateralism. We celebrate the continued strengthening of multilateralism in the framework of the United Nations with the positive outcome of the negotiations of the document to be adopted by this conference. Costa Rica faithfully believes in sustainable development, in human rights, and in the promise of leaving no one behind. Cooperation and solidarity are indispensable to attain the Sustainable Development Goals. I conclude my statement by expressing the deep gratitude we have to the people and the government of the Republic of Argentina, which has been kind enough to host this important conference and to express our hope that peace and the benefits of sustainable development will reach all of humanity. Thank you very much, sir.
I thank His Excellency Manuel Ventura, Minister for Foreign Affairs and Worship of Costa Rica, for his statement. Now I have the privilege to invite His Excellency Jerome Xavier. Oh. Okay, thank you, sir.
Intervention of the like-minded group of countries, supporters of the middle-income countries. Chair, I have the honor to speak on behalf of the like-minded group of countries, supporters of the middle-income countries, which includes Armenia, Belarus, Chile, Colombia, Costa Rica, Dominican Republic, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, Jamaica, Mexico, Panama, and the Philippines. At the outset, We would like to thank the government of Argentina for hosting the second high-level United Nations Conference on South-South Cooperation, which we believe is a privileged space to highlight the valuable contributions of the South in the global efforts to achieve sustainable development. In our view, this conference also represents a landmark opportunity to highlight the progress so far achieved by a great number of developing countries across all regions of the world in effectively implementing our global sustainable development commitments, including those in the framework of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Chair, our group remains committed to supporting all developing countries in their path toward sustainability. We underscore the solidarity of middle-income countries with other developing countries, reflected through the financial, technical, technology transfer, and capacity building support being provided by middle-income countries. In that sense, our group would like to emphasize the importance of knowledge-sharing platforms such as the High-Level Committee for South-South Cooperation and the pivotal roles of South-South and triangular cooperation for middle-income countries who play the double role of providers and recipients of these types of cooperation. International cooperation is still a powerful tool for complementing middle-income countries' efforts to mobilize public resources domestically to achieve sustainable development. Our group is convinced that increased participation of middle-income countries in international cooperation initiative has a multiplying effect that can benefit all developing countries. Chair, we believe that a crucial part of understanding the role of South-South cooperation requires new approaches to the way we measure progress in sustainable development. As we have expressed on many occasions, our group is convinced that economic growth in and of itself is not equivalent to advances towards sustainable development and does not reflect the realities in most of our countries. For example, at all levels of per capita income, developing countries continue to face serious challenges, including obstacles in relation to poverty eradication, inequality, external debt, and environmental vulnerabilities, among others. Even high-income countries face some of these same challenges. There are, in addition, structural gaps that represent an obstacle to inclusive growth and which impede the development of the developmental prospects in many middle-income countries, social levels of savings and investments, and the quality of affordable public health care and education. Also, improvement in macroeconomic indicators do not necessarily reflect advancements in the eradication of poverty. Given that high levels of inequality or even a rise in inequality remain pervasive in countries classified as middle-income countries, even in those countries with high economic growth. We emphasize the need for South-South cooperation and triangular cooperation to support and improve data collection and analysis of high-quality disaggregated data as important aspects to better understand the multidimensional aspects of poverty for smart and transparent decision-making. Chair, identifying and addressing structural gaps can improve the understanding of development needs of middle-income countries, helping to determine mechanisms capable of attending those gaps in a tailored fashion with higher efficiency and precision. For these reasons, in our view, reconceptualizing the systematic approach to the category of middle-income countries is an urgent matter if we are to accomplish real and long-lasting results in sustainable development worldwide. It is our view that all developing countries would benefit more from decisive action taken on the commitments of the Addis Ababa Action Agenda, which calls for the United Nations to work with international financial institutions in development of transparent measures of progress on sustainable development that go beyond per capita income, recognizing poverty in all its forms, the social, economic, and environmental dimensions, and structural gaps at all levels. It is our view of our group that middle-income countries, and particularly some of the more economically or environmentally vulnerable ones, still depends heavily on North-South cooperation. This is why a measure that includes other dimensions of development is greatly needed as a basis to determine official development assistance flows. Also, we commit to strengthening triangular cooperation as a means of bringing relevant experience and expertise to bear in development cooperation. Chair, we would like to conclude by inviting the international community to act promptly to address sustainable development in a more comprehensive manner to everyone, everywhere, leaving no one behind. Thank you very much.
I'd like to thank His Excellency Manuel Ventura, Minister of Foreign Affairs and Worship of Costa Rica, who spoke on behalf of the like-minded group of countries, supporters of middle-income countries. Thank you, sir. Now I have the privilege to invite His Excellency Jerome Xavier Walcott, Minister for Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade of Barbados. May I urge the distinguished speakers to kindly observe the agreed time limit of 5 minutes. Thank you. You have the floor, sir.
Mr. President, Your Excellencies, honorable ministers, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I must first begin by expressing my sincere thanks to the government of Argentina for being such a gracious host, and I commend them for the warmth and excellent hospitality extended to my delegation and me since our arrival in Buenos Aires. I also take this opportunity to thank the government of Argentina for hosting and facilitating the international community on this most important occasion, the 40th anniversary of the Buenos Aires Plan of Action. Mr. President, the Buenos Aires Action Plan has served as a much-needed blueprint for South-South cooperation and triangular cooperation around which developing countries can coalesce. The significance of this second high-level meeting cannot be overstated. As developing countries, we fully recognize that without a firm recommitment to South-South cooperation and a strengthening of our resolve to harness this framework for enhanced collaboration, our nations will continue to struggle to fulfill commitments under the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. And this is especially true of small island developing states such as Barbados. Mr. President, over the past few years, we have witnessed changes in the landscape of development assistance and international aid, which in general have not been very beneficial to developing countries. In this changing and challenging environment, it is all the more vital that we leverage our strength as a group to ensure that our voice is heard on all issues of importance to us, and that we exert the weight of our bargaining power in multilateral negotiations. It is my sincere hope that over the next 2 days, we will use this opportunity in accordance with the guidelines captured in our new outcome document to assess progress and to review lessons learned since the adoption of the Buenos Aires Plan of Action in 1978. The theme of this conference bids us to look for opportunities in South-South cooperation in implementing the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. As we work to implement our shared aspiration of eradicating poverty in all its forms and dimensions, reducing inequalities, and protecting the environment, this platform serves a useful purpose in facilitating communication, promoting and strengthening economic integration, and coordinating policies on development issues of relevance to the majority of developing countries. In this context, I urge the international community to put in place a much-needed mechanism to support the establishment of a permanent South-South institution. This institution will bring together global leaders and thinkers from the South to reflect and deliberate on the challenges confronting developing countries and the international community. Mr. President, the government of Barbados notes with appreciation that regional commissions such as the Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean, ECLAC, have integrated South-South and triangular cooperation into their respective strategic frameworks and other planning instruments. I therefore take this opportunity to thank ECLAC for its ongoing advocacy on regional issues, and particularly for proposing to the international community the structural gap approach as a way to tackle the structural barriers which middle-income countries and small island development states such as Barbados face. ECLAC has consistently joined with Latin America and Caribbean middle-income countries in calling for greater flexibility and broader criteria for determining access to capital, including the use of vulnerability, especially to natural and or climatic disasters, and other indicators that go beyond per capita income, per capita gross domestic product. Sir, permit me to highlight here the SIDS Green Economy Knowledge Transfer Platform in Barbados, which is expected to leverage UN Partnership for Action on the Green Economy Resources to serve as a hub for knowledge exchange and capacity building among SIDS on inclusive green economy principles. Barbados sees the knowledge platform as a tangible contribution to the implementation of paragraph 109 of the Samoa Pathway, which deals with capacity building. This initiative can also serve as a catalyst for scaling up and delivering targeted South-South cooperation interventions for addressing SIDS sustainable development challenges. Mr. President, I must also take this opportunity to recognize the Latin American and Caribbean Initiative for Sustainable Development, also known as ELAC, which has been the basis for cooperation among Latin American and Caribbean countries since its adoption at the 2002 World Summit on Sustainable Development. Governed by the Forum of Ministers of Environment of Latin America and the Caribbean, the ILAC has since been renewed and aligned to the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. It is our belief that the successes and lessons learned from the ILAC can be utilized to inform and strengthen the delivery of country-driven South-South and triangular cooperation programming, particularly in relation to advancing environmental dimensions of the 2030 Agenda. It is with this partnership in mind that I urge the United Nations, even as it undergoes its internal reform process of making itself more fit for purpose, to ensure that it continues to support regional organizations engaged in promotion and execution of transparent, impactful, sustainable, and accountable development practices. I call on the United Nations system and the international community to ensure that the SIDS agenda and supporting institutional mechanisms continue to have the reliable and consistent funding support needed to undergird South-South cooperation within and among SIDS. This was one of the key findings of the 2016 Joint Inspection Unit report on the comprehensive review of the UN system support to SIDS. As a country which has championed the sustainable development of SIDS from its very inception, Barbados reiterates the importance of implementing the recommendations of this JIEU report and the need for support of the development partners if this is to become a reality. Mr. President, in closing, I look forward to hearing from and engaging with all member states present at this meeting over the next few days. It is my sincere hope that we will have frank and open discussions that will ultimately lead to the mobilization of adequate resources for enhancing South-South and triangular cooperation. I also use this opportunity to invite you to the Barbados in 2020, when we will host the Forum of Ministers of Environment of Latin America and the Caribbean, another long-standing example of regional cooperation. I thank you.
I thank His Excellency Jerome Xavier Walcott, Minister for Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade of Barbados, for his statement. Now I have the privilege to request His Excellency Nestor Papalogio Bardales, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Peru. You have the floor, sir.